They were connected by a crown, but their story began long before either woman ever entered Buckingham Palace. One was born to become one of the most famous monarchs in history, a woman whose entire life was dedicated to duty, tradition, and the survival of the British crown. The other was a woman who spent years being judged by millions, blamed by the public, and surrounded by controversy before eventually standing beside the king as Queen Consort. For decades, many believed Queen Elizabeth II and Queen Camilla had nothing in common. But hidden deep inside Britain's ancient aristocratic history is a connection that stretches back through generations of powerful families, forgotten ancestors, and royal bloodlines. The truth is that their paths crossed long before the world knew their names. To understand how Queen Camilla and Queen Elizabeth II are connected, we have to travel back through the complicated world of British nobility. For centuries, Britain's royal families and aristocratic houses were connected through marriage. Dukes married daughters of other noble families. Wealthy families joined their bloodlines with powerful houses. These relationships created a massive family tree where many people at the highest levels of society became distant relatives without even realizing it. Queen Elizabeth II was born Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor on April 21, 1926. At the time of her birth, nobody expected her to become queen. She was the daughter of Prince Albert, the Duke of York, who was second in line to the throne. But history changed dramatically when her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated the throne in 1936. Suddenly, Elizabeth's father became King George VI, and a young princess became the future ruler of Britain. From childhood, Elizabeth was prepared for a life unlike any other. She learned discipline, responsibility, and the importance of putting duty above personal feelings. When she became queen in 1952, she inherited a monarchy facing a rapidly changing world. Over the next 7 decades, she became a symbol of stability, serving through political changes, social revolutions, and personal challenges. Camilla Rosemary Shand was born years later, in 1947. Her life began far away from the expectations placed on a future monarch, but she was still connected to Britain's upper-class world. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was a respected military officer, and her family had strong links to the British aristocracy. She grew up around country estates, traditional British society, and many people connected to royal circles. Although Elizabeth and Camilla came from different backgrounds, their family histories were connected through distant ancestors. Genealogists have traced links between them through old aristocratic families. Like many members of Britain's upper class, their family trees overlap through generations of marriages between noble houses. They were not close relatives, but they belonged to the same vast historical network created by centuries of aristocratic connections. However, their real connection was not the one that captured the world's attention. It was not their distant family link. It was the dramatic story that unfolded when Camilla's life became connected with the future king of Britain. In the early 1970s, Prince Charles met Camilla Shand. They shared similar interests, humor, and a love of the countryside. Their relationship developed during a time when Charles was searching for his place as the future monarch. But royal expectations created enormous pressure. The future king was expected to choose a bride who fit certain traditions and public expectations. Camilla eventually married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973, and Charles later married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981. Around the world, millions watched Diana's wedding and believed they were witnessing a perfect royal fairy tale. Diana was young, beautiful, and instantly loved by the public. But behind the image of perfection, the reality was far more complicated. The marriage between Charles and Diana faced serious difficulties. Their private struggles became public, and the entire world watched as one of the most famous royal marriages began to fall apart. When Charles and Camilla's relationship became known, public reaction was intense. Many people saw Camilla as a symbol of the problems inside the monarchy. For Queen Elizabeth II, the situation was extremely difficult. She was not only a mother watching her family struggle, but also the head of the institution that represented Britain itself. Every decision had consequences. Every public statement mattered. The monarchy had survived for centuries, but the modern media age created challenges no previous monarch had faced. During this period, Elizabeth remained mostly silent about personal family matters. She rarely revealed her private emotions, choosing instead to focus on her role as queen. Behind palace walls, however, she was watching one of the greatest challenges of her reign unfold. Then, in 1997, tragedy changed everything. The death of Princess Diana shocked the world and created a moment of reflection for the royal family. Public attitudes began to shift slowly over the following years. Charles and Camilla's relationship continued, but rebuilding trust with the public would take time. Many people believed Camilla could never be accepted by the British public, and even fewer imagined she would one day become queen. But history has a strange way of changing the stories people think they already understand. After years of criticism and public doubt, something unexpected began to happen. The woman who had once been one of the most controversial figures in Britain slowly started to change the way people saw her. Camilla stepped away from the dramatic headlines and focused on a quieter role within the royal family. She supported charitable causes, worked behind the scenes, and gradually built a reputation based on dedication rather than controversy. Time became the greatest force in changing public opinion. The anger and emotions surrounding the past began to soften as a new generation viewed the story differently. Many people who once rejected Camilla began to recognize that royal history was more complicated than a simple story of heroes and villains. Behind the headlines were human beings, personal struggles, difficult choices, and years of change. Queen Elizabeth II watched this transformation carefully. Throughout her reign, she rarely revealed her private thoughts, but her actions often spoke louder than words. The monarch who had witnessed decades of royal challenges eventually accepted that the future of the crown required moving forward. The survival of the monarchy depended not only on tradition but also on adaptation. In 2005, Charles and Camilla married in a civil ceremony. The moment represented a major turning point. It was not a fairy tale beginning like the wedding of Charles and Diana, but it was a new chapter after decades of controversy. For many observers, the marriage showed how much time had changed public attitudes. Years later, Queen Elizabeth II made one of the most significant announcements of her reign. Before her Platinum Jubilee, she expressed her sincere wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. The statement surprised many people because it showed how dramatically the relationship between the monarchy and Camilla had evolved. The woman who had once been viewed by many as an outsider was now being prepared for one of the highest positions in the British royal system. It was a transformation that few could have predicted decades earlier. But the connection between Camilla and Elizabeth was not only about Charles, marriage, or the throne. Their deeper connection was written in history itself. Through generations of aristocratic marriages, their family trees had crossed long before modern royal drama existed. They were connected by distant ancestors who lived centuries before them, proving that Britain's royal and noble families were part of one enormous historical network. Perhaps the most fascinating parallel in their story comes from Alice Keppel, Camilla's great-grandmother. Alice Keppel was known as the close companion of King Edward VII, the son of Queen Victoria and the great-grandfather of Elizabeth II. This historical link has fascinated royal watchers because it creates a remarkable connection between two different eras of monarchy. However, history does not simply repeat itself. Alice Keppel and Camilla lived in completely different times, under completely different circumstances. The role of women in royal life, the expectations of society, and the nature of the monarchy had all transformed. The similarities may capture attention, but the differences reveal how much the world had changed. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, history entered another chapter. Charles became King Charles III, and Camilla became Queen Consort. A woman who once faced enormous criticism stood at the center of the institution she had spent years being judged by. The journey from rejection to acceptance remains one of the most dramatic transformations in modern royal history. It is a story about family, reputation, forgiveness, and the unpredictable path of destiny. Two women who appeared to represent completely different sides of the monarchy were actually connected by history, ancestry, and the complicated world of royal tradition. Queen Elizabeth II represented the past, a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and devotion to the crown. Queen Camilla represented a different story, one of survival, patience, and transformation. Their lives followed completely different paths, yet history brought them together in a way nobody could have imagined. Because behind every crown is a story, behind every royal title is a human journey. And sometimes, the most surprising connections are not created by power or politics, but by the invisible threads of history that connect generations together. The story of Queen Elizabeth II and Queen Camilla is not simply about two queens. It is about how time changes perception, how history remembers people differently, and how the same person who was once criticized by millions can eventually become part of the very institution that once judged her. And perhaps the greatest surprise is this: long before the world debated their relationship, long before cameras followed their every move, and long before either woman carried the weight of a crown, their families had already been connected by history. Because in the world of royalty, the past is never truly gone. It is always waiting to reveal another secret.